Stephen had always been grateful for his grandmother's love and care, but there was one thing that he just couldn't stand: her knitted sweaters. They were always too tight, too itchy, and far too colorful. Every time he visited her, she would proudly present him with a new one, and every time he had to politely decline, claiming that he already had enough. But the truth was, Stephen couldn't stand the sight of those sweaters anymore. They took up half of his small apartment, and he had to keep them all in a big cardboard box under his bed. He knew his grandmother meant well, but he just couldn't wear them. So, he came up with a plan. He would lose them all, one by one, until she got the hint and stopped knitting them. One day, Stephen's grandmother surprised him by showing up at his doorstep unannounced. She asked to see all of the sweaters he had received from her over the years, and Stephen panicked. He knew he couldn't show her the box full of sweaters under his bed, so he quickly came up with an excuse. Someone must have stolen them all. His grandmother was devastated, but she didn't suspect a thing. To make matters worse, she decided to knit him 10 more sweaters as a replacement for the ones she thought were stolen. Stephen was horrified. He would now have to find a way to get rid of 20 sweaters. But his grandmother was not deterred. She insisted on delivering each sweater to Stephen personally, and each one was uglier than the last. Stephen was at his wits' end. He knew he couldn't keep all these sweaters, but he also couldn't bear to hurt his grandmother's feelings. So, he came up with a plan. He would secretly donate them all to a local charity and hope that his grandmother never found out. And so, every time she visited him, he would put on one of the sweaters and pretend to be wearing it, while secretly packing them away in bags and dropping them off at the nearest thrift store. As the months went by, Stephen's apartment was gradually freed from the pile of colorful sweaters. His grandmother never suspected a thing, and Stephen breathed a sigh of relief every time she left his apartment with a new one in hand. But deep down, he knew that he couldn't keep this up forever. Eventually, his grandmother would find out the truth, and he would have to face the consequences of his actions. What is Stephen's problem with his grandmother's knitted sweaters? Stephen doesn't like his grandmother's knitted sweaters because they are too tight, too itchy, and far too colorful. He also can't stand the sight of them anymore, and they take up half of his small apartment. Why does Stephen lose the sweaters? Stephen loses the sweaters to avoid wearing them and to get rid of them without hurting his grandmother's feelings. What is Stephen's plan for getting rid of the sweaters? Stephen secretly donates the sweaters to a local charity every time his grandmother visits him, while pretending to wear them. Why does Stephen feel guilty about his actions? Stephen feels guilty because he knows that he can't keep this up forever, and eventually his grandmother will find out the truth. He also knows that he is not being honest with her about what he wants. What do you think will happen when Stephen's grandmother finds out the truth? It is likely that when Stephen's grandmother finds out the truth, she will be hurt and disappointed in Stephen for not being honest with her. She may also stop knitting sweaters for him altogether.